the Mau Mau in Kenya against British colonialism. My name is Hallie Murray, and I am a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I'm also the chair of our local Boston chapter, and I will be your MC tonight. Got my sparkles on, I'm ready for this. So I want to really welcome you and thank everyone here for attending. I know that no matter how you found out about this, that it's going to be a really incredible program tonight, and you'll be transformed by what we're going to present here. So please make sure that your cell phones are off or on silent. The restrooms are over here on the side down there. There's also a water fountain. And, I lost my spot. Okay, so now it's my honor to commemorate the third stop on the 7-city nationwide speaking tour being hosted by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and the African People's Solidarity Committee. We're halfway there. Under the campaign of the Days in Solidarity with African People, Unity Through Reparations. Please join me in applauding this third event of the 2017 Day in Solidarity with African People campaign. Yes, finally here. Right on. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is an organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing in our own white communities to win other white people like ourselves to unite with reparations to African people. The African People's Socialist Party recognizes that African people are oppressed wherever they have been dispersed around the world, whether in the United States, in Europe, South America, or on the continent of Africa itself. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement has been holding Days in Solidarity with African People for over 20 years. This is our mandated work assigned by the African People's Socialist Party to build these Days in Solidarity with African People, to extend the struggle for white reparations to African people into the belly of the beast of white society, and to win the white community to the stance of solidarity with African liberation. Yeah. This tour is raising reparations for Black Star Industries. Black Star Industries, LLC, is the creation of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Black Star Industries was made to create commerce by and between African people around the world. Reparations in the hands of Black Star Industries contribute to a new economic foundation for the entire African community worldwide. These resources make up the seed of a socialist economy where African workers control the means of production and have self-determination. This year's campaign is more significant than ever. 2 generations ago, the United States government militarily destroyed the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And now we are living in an era of we call the crisis of imperialism. We see this with the election of Donald Trump. We see overt white nationalist violence all around. And this is also an era of resistance of African people, and also of white people choosing to side with them, as exemplified in the electoral campaigns this summer of Akile Anai and Jesse Neville in St. Petersburg, Florida, for the Unity Through Reparations campaign, which that campaign won hundreds and thousands of supporters throughout the city of St. Pete, the Tampa Bay, and around the world. It got international media coverage. Yeah, which you'll hear all about tonight from our speakers over here. It was incredible. And it's not over. This is also the time of unprecedented growth for the African People's Socialist Party and its expanding influence and membership internationally. In this campaign, we are touring leaders of the African People's Socialist Party and the African People's Solidarity Committee, as well as Akile Anai and Jesse Neville. Akile is chair of the Committee for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls, which fights for justice for Lanaya Miller, Ashanti Butler, and Dominique Battle, who were murdered last year by the notorious Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. Akile is also chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, or CURED, as it's called. And Jesse is chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and vice chair of CURED. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests from the African People's Socialist Party. We salute and welcome Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We salute Akile Anai. salute Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess. And we salute Desi Neville. Thank you for coming all the way from Florida to be here on this floor. Now, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, the Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the author of Overturning the Culture of Violence, which you can buy in the back today. And she was the first white person in history to embrace the worldview and struggle of the African working class as her own, Chairwoman Penny Hess.
Unity through reparations! Uhuru! I just really want to welcome everybody here tonight. And I want to salute Hallie for doing such a great job in building this event. And actually, it's great to be here in Boston. I would just like to see how many hands of people who are already members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. All right! Wow, that's awesome. That's powerful. And to all of those who are here for the first time, really welcome you and believe that you're here because you want to change this world. Because you want to say that we're not passing this down to the next generation, that we're going to do everything that we can to change this world. We're going to struggle. We're going to be out there, and we're going to raise reparations to African people. And I also want to salute Comrade KC, who is a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee and also a leader of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is the mass organization of APSC, and APSC is an organization of the African People's Socialist Party led by Chairman Omale Shatella. And I want to salute KC, Comrade KC, because she is going to be going to St. Louis, working on the front of the Uhuru movement there that has been built especially since 2014 after the police murder of Mike Brown and the resistance of African people that we saw there. And the Uhuru movement has a powerful base there that is the the headquarters of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, which is the mass organization of the African People's Socialist Party. And it is also building powerful institutions in Uhuru House in St. Louis and the Jico Kitchen and many other things that you're going to hear more about. So it's very exciting, and I just really want to salute Comrade KC. Some of the comdads, as they're called, that are here tonight. Some of the fathers, Terry and Clyde, that are here. Really appreciate you. Just want to say that. And I want to salute Akile Anayi, who was just such a powerful, powerful people's candidate for District 6 City Council, and many of you probably saw it online. Bold, courageous, powerful representative of the African working class, Akile Anayi tonight. And my comrade, also a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, a leading member, Jesse Neville, who ran for mayor, the people's mayor of St. Petersburg, Florida, who ran on the platform of unity through reparations. And I want to salute Chairman Omale Shatella, under whose leadership I have had the honor as a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee to work, to be organized for the last 41 years. So we'll talk about that a little bit more soon. But I do want to welcome everybody to the Day in Solidarity with African People. And this is something, as has been said, that we hold every year. This year we've been out in Oakland, California. Of course, we've been in St. Petersburg, Florida. We've been here in Boston. We're going to be in Brooklyn tomorrow night. We're going to be in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're going to be in Gainesville, Florida. These are some of the places that we're going to be this year. And we're very, very excited about this. And, you know, we feel that this is a period of time when we as white people can begin to hear and answer the call of how we rectify our relationship to African people and how we can take on what it is that we need to do. And that's what we're really going to talk about tonight. And I want to say, first of all, that the Day in Solidarity with African People is a tribute to African people from the white community, from the white population. It is a tribute to the genius, to the science, to the arts, to civilization that was given to us on this planet by African people. It is a tribute to the humanity of African people, to the constant, endless struggle that African people have led for the last 600 years to end all forms of oppression, to build a world in which all human beings can live, no one at the expense of anybody else, to rectify this world, to end this white power, and to create a world without war, without injustice. And to say that the African People's Socialist Party is the highest expression of that, the organized African working class that is fighting to reunite and liberate Africa and African people all around the world, and that Africa is the homeland of all African people everywhere. And it is also, the Day in Solidarity with African people is also an acknowledgement. It is acknowledgement of the fact that Europe was poor, Europe was under feudalism, and that the only reason that we as white people have resources, that we have prosperity, that we have opportunity, even the experience of democracy in the society, is based on the reality that Europe came out of the caves and assaulted Africa, beginning in about the 1400s, that turned African human beings into the first commodities of capitalism, that turned human beings into a means of production for sale, as a sale value, as a use value, as Karl Marx would say, that this is how the system started, that it started with untold violence that continues on until today, and that it's talking about the fact that African human beings were enslaved, were packed up in ships, were worked to death, often with a lifespan of 7 years. That was the greatest amount of production that the world has ever known. It created the greatest wealth that the world has ever known. And also that Africa itself was assaulted, and still is today, with all of its resources being taken out. When you look at, the kind of thing that happens in Sierra Leone, where all of, there was those mudslides. But that wouldn't happen when African people have control of their resources, their land, and the value of their stolen labor. And the Day in Solidarity with African people is also an acknowledgement that it wasn't just some abstract government that did that, but it was white people, it was our ancestors that did this, that acted as the colonial state, that lynched, that burned, that raped, that tormented, that enslaved, that dehumanized African people so that we could raise our children, so that we could climb up the ladder of success, so that we could sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. It is an acknowledgement of that this is how we got to be where we are. This is the story of this country, and in every rebellion and every struggle, even every police killing that we see against an African person in this country, underneath the surface, this question that slavery and genocide and the assault and colonization of other human beings, the majority of humanity, is boiling and roiling under the surface of this country, and it can't be reformed away. It can't be changed. It can't be legislated. It can't be unracified. It is there. It is a material reality of this country. And so it acknowledges, the Day in Solidarity with African people acknowledges that we as white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. And it doesn't mean that we're Bill Gates or the Rockefellers or anything like that. But it means that even as we might be workers or women or LGBTQ or environmentalists or whatever, that we have united with our own ruling class, the ruling class of white power, to continue the oppression of African people. We have participated in the genocide against the indigenous people very, very enthusiastically as a people. And we have participated in the U.S. government's assault on the majority of the people on the planet Earth who've lived under colonialism, lived under wars of occupation, carried them out in our name, which we were gladly willing to give our name to that. And the Day in Solidarity with African People is an apology, but it recognizes that there's no apology without reparations. Yeah. There is no apology without reparations. Yeah. We can't stand there and say, oh, we're sorry, can we all get along now? Because no, we can't, because we're still sitting on the stolen resources. And we're sitting on, we are the colonizers. And the Day in Solidarity with African People is also a commitment. Is a commitment to struggle. Is a commitment to say that we are going into the white community under the leadership of the African Revolution. We're going to acknowledge that the struggle is against colonialism. It's a political and economic state power that operates in our name and with our participation, and that we do benefit from economically. We are the colonizers. We are the colonizers. We are the children of the slave master facing the children of the enslaved. And these are the responsibilities that we carry, And until this contradiction is resolved, there is no way that the future can unfold, and that there is no ability, as we say, to reform this system because it's in its DNA. They talk about, oh, well, we're going to struggle against the Confederate statues. But what about, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? Yes. Yeah. They were Southern plantation owners. They owned hundreds of enslaved people. Mm-hmm. They were the template for the South, the Confederacy. They lived in Virginia. They were slave owners from Virginia. So this is what America is. This is what America is, and this is what we have to remember. This is what we have to take on and take responsibility for. So the African People's Solidarity Committee was formed 41 years ago this month in St. Petersburg, Florida by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and that, as has been said, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who began as a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1960s, tearing down a hideous mural inside of St. Petersburg, Florida, has been struggling ever since. He dedicated his life to one thing: gaining power in the hands of the African working class and freedom and liberation for African people everywhere. But this movement of the 1960s was defeated by a program that was a counterinsurgency. It was called COINTELPRO. It was responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and it destroyed militarily the movement of African people in this country, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party, because we are socialists, by the way. Because we can't, capitalism has to go, and we have to have a world, and it's all but we can't be socialists because we say we are, or because, we live in Denmark or something, and we say that's socialist because Israel says it's socialist. No, we're saying that we are socialists because we're under the leadership of the leading force against imperialism that is struggling for power in the hands of the African working class. And that the chairman he created a political theory called African internationalism. He created a strategy to win everybody he can, including African people inside the borders of the United States and around the world, to understand that the independence for African people, just like the Vietnamese called for, the anti-colonial struggle of African people is key. It must be supported by every freedom-loving person. And I just want to read something really quick. This is an incredible book by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. It's called An Uneasy Equilibrium, and it's referring to the balance of power between the colonized and the imperialists, between the past and the future. And this is how we can see and how the chairman has defined the world today. And the chairman says in this, he says, "We have never been diverted from our mission of capturing power and uniting Africa and our nation under the leadership of the African working class." So that's what he's saying, that their struggle is to capture power. And he said, "We determined long ago that characterizing our movement as a struggle against racism is a self-defeating waste of time." And you're like, huh? What? I thought we supposed to be struggling against racism? But no, because the chairman tells us, he's saying, what is called racism is simply the ideological foundation of capitalist imperialism. Racism is a concept that denies Africans our national identity and dignity rather than defining the system of African oppression. The chairman says, it relegates African people to the Sisyphean task of winning acceptance from and often becoming one with their oppressors. So in a certain way, if we understand this, one of the most racist things that you can do is say that the struggle is against racism. Because what does that keep us in the center? And that keeps the system in place, intact. You know, has anybody been watching the whole series of the Vietnamese people that's been running on the public TV? Oh, you have to watch it. Please do. It's very powerful to see what the Vietnamese did. They kicked the ass of the United States royally, and it was so powerful. And this is what the African People's Socialist Party and the struggle of African people is about. One of the reasons that the Vietnamese could be so successful is because at the same time that they were struggling on their home ground, that African people were struggling against their same enemy inside the borders of the United States. And they understood that very clearly. And that the question is that, you know, there's an interview, there's a little place in one of the series, in one of the weeks of the Vietnam series, where a Vietnamese man who, you know, was still alive back in that, you know, back then, he was an older person, and, you know, he said, well, the French, because France colonized Vietnam for 100 years, and he said, oh, the French, they don't even treat us like human beings, you know? But he didn't say, well, therefore, we want the French to unlearn racism. We don't want them, therefore we want the French military to wear body cameras. He said, we want our land back, and we will fight you until you have to leave, until you die. We will be free.
Yes.
And they were willing to go through that. And that is because it was a question of colonialism. And colonialism gives us a way out. If we're struggling against the ideas in our head, can we ever change that? I don't know. We do have these ideas in our head. That's part of colonialism. Of course we do. But the fact is that struggling against colonialism, it is a political and economic system that can be defeated. We've seen it. The Vietnamese did it. Others did it. It can be defeated under the leadership of African people in alliance with other colonized people who rest inside of this pedestal that is this system's weakest point. And I know that my time is up. My time is not up. I have 1 minute. Okay, so I just, I want to say that this is a very important point, because this is what distinguishes this movement from something else. It's not a feel-good movement. It's not where we can go take a weekend on unlearning racism and go, whoop, no, I'm good. Because when we do that anyway, Africans are still being gunned down by the police.
Yeah.
The prisons are still stuffed with African people, and we still go home to our tree-lined streets. And now my time is up. But I want to say that the white population in this country is in a crisis, because imperialism is in a crisis, because all around the world and inside this country, African oppressed and colonized peoples are fighting back, and the U.S. can't do with impunity what it expects to do to the oppressed of this planet. It has to pay a price for that inside this country and around the world. And that as white people, we can see that suddenly white people are getting massively addicted to heroin and opioids. And, you know, of course, when drugs were imposed on the African community by the U.S. government, it meant that, you know, millions of African people were sent to prisons. White people don't get that. We get treatment, you know, for this. But, you know, we know that white people are committing suicide in huge numbers, have anxiety, have addiction, alcohol, you know, all of these contradictions, which are even lowering the life expectancy of the white population. And that we do have a way out of this. We can join the people on the planet Earth. We can end our self-imposed isolation from everybody else. We can end and get rid of our relationship with U.S. imperialism and white power. We can end that once and for all under the leadership of the revolutionary forces of the African working class and be part of building a new world. We don't have to be at odds with everybody else, and it is that creates all the anxiety and fears for white people, and we don't need to do that. We need you. We need all of us to do what we're supposed to do inside the belly of this beast, in solidarity with African people, in solidarity with all the oppressed people on the planet Earth, and in our own interest to be part of a planet in which all human beings can live. No one at the expense of anybody else. Uhuru.
Yeah, thank you so much, Penny, for that incredible introduction to this event. And it's just, yeah, what Penny summed up, it's really clear that we're not in the Uhuru movement and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, we're not engaged in a struggle against racism. We are fighting against colonialism. As Penny just said, it's clear that colonialism is a material thing that we can overturn. And for white people, we can unite with the anti-colonial struggle of the Uhuru movement and the African People's Socialist Party and fight for reparations. And that's why we're here tonight. So thank you again, Penny. Our next speaker, I'd like to introduce the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. He's also the vice chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, or CURED, and member of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Please welcome Jesse Neville.
Uhuru. Uhuru. Unity through
reparations!
All right. Thank you so much, Hallie and everyone. It's really good to see all of you. And as was stated, my name is Jesse Neville. I'm the national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is an organization of white people working in the white community for reparations to African people. And USM is directly accountable to the African People's Solidarity Committee, which was led by the person we just heard speak, Chairwoman Penny Hess. And the African People's Solidarity Committee is directly under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, which is led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So I really want to salute both of them, and I also want to salute the speaker who will be following me, also a member of the African People's Socialist Party, an amazing leader, Akile Anai, who is here with us. Also, I would like to salute all of you, and especially the Boston branch of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Can we get a round of applause for all the amazing organizers that made this event happen? And I would like to start off by saying that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is built with 3 principles of unity. 1, we work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And that's non-negotiable. When you join USM, you're joining an organization that is under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Everything we do is accountable to the agenda, the interests, and the timeline, and the strategy of the African People's Socialist Party, including this event. Number 2, we stand in solidarity with African self-determination, the right of African people to lead their own struggle for national liberation. And number 3, we organize white people for, yes. we take responsibility for our own people and the crimes we have committed, and the fact that every single white person rests upon a pedestal of 600 years of enslavement and colonialism and genocide against African people, indigenous people, and the oppressed peoples of the planet Earth. Those are our three principles of unity. And it was on the basis of those three principles that at a meeting about 6 months ago, I was assigned to run for mayor of St. Petersburg. And I was assigned to run for mayor as part of a strategy under the strategic leadership of an amazing campaign that was run to elect Akile for District 6 City Council. And that strategy was put in place by the African People's Socialist Party to introduce all the ideas that we're talking about here into the bourgeois electoral arena, into an electoral space, an electoral contest that, as the chairman has explained, was created to function as a nonviolent competition between contending sectors of the white ruling class. That's what an election is in the United States of America. It's a nonviolent competition. It's basically a fake wrestling match between corporations and different sectors of the white ruling class. So the African People's Socialist Party unleashed into that arena the politics of African internationalism and the struggle for reparations to African people. And basically took this weapon, which is the electoral system, which is designed to maintain the status quo of a system built on oppression, and turn that weapon against the oppressor. That's what happened in St. Petersburg, Florida, with the campaign of Akile for District 6 and myself for mayor that ran on a platform of unity through reparations. The theme of this event was the theme of a 6-month electoral campaign. That's the first time that's ever happened in history, to have 2 candidates running for public office in St. Petersburg, Florida, on a reparations platform. And Akile ran in District 6, where she went up against, District 6 used to be a predominantly African district. It is not anymore because of gentrification, because of gerrymandering, because of colonialism. And she ran on an explicitly black agenda, a black agenda for national self-determination that was based upon the agenda laid out by the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, in which Chairman Amali Shatella plays a leading role. And as part of the same strategy, the party decided to run a white guy for mayor of a predominantly white city on a reparations platform. Now, many clueless journalists asked throughout this process, why would you make reparations the center of your platform if you're running in a majority white city? You need to address the white people. Unity through reparations was speaking to white people. It was a call to white people. In fact, that was the whole point. The unity through reparations is saying that if we want to achieve unity with African people on whose backs we have benefited from the oppression for 600 years, the way we do that is through reparations. And that reparations to African people, because the system rests upon the oppression of African people, the destruction of this system will rest upon reparations to African people. So any problem that we experience in this social system, whether it's the various forms of oppression that sectors of the white population face, whether it's like in St. Pete where the mayor dumped 300 million gallons of sewage all over the city, whether it's high cost of rent, whether it's small businesses going out of business, all of those things rest upon the oppression of the black community. So the best way for us to fight back against anything that we experience is to unite through reparations to the black community with the people who have been fighting longest and hardest to end this system of oppression altogether. So unity through reparations was not a feel-good slogan saying through reparations we can all be friends. Unity through reparations was a war cry. Because the type of unity that we're building through reparations is unity against the white ruling class. It's unity so we can fight and destroy the white ruling class. And in the class war against the white ruling class, reparations is an atomic bomb. Because the whole system rests upon the oppression of African people. So you had in St. Petersburg, Florida, despite the best efforts of the ruling class media to paint us as fringe candidates and all these things, you had the whole election was not supposed to be about let alone reparations. It wasn't supposed to be about black people at all. It was supposed to be about the baseball team and whether they're going to stay in St. Pete, or the tourist attraction known as the pier, and whether we should put kayak launch pads on them. This is what the election was supposed to be about. But because we invaded the electoral arena, backed by an exuberant, powerful people's movement that was generated by this campaign, it was not about those things. It was about justice for 3 teenage black girls murdered by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department in 2016. It was about Dominique Battle, Ashanti Butler, and Lanaya Miller. That's what the election was about. It was about reparations to the black community. It was about black community control of the police. That's what the election was about. It was so much about that that even our staunchest enemies in the local media had to admit that none of those things would have been talked about if it had not been for our campaigns. The most frothing reactionary newspaper in Florida published an article saying, "Give the Uhuru movement credit for raising these issues." But the thing, yes. Not to mention, the campaigns galvanized the African working class and emboldened and empowered the African working class, and also galvanized white people who had never before had a candidate running in a local election who was the voice of all white people who want to end the foul relationship that we've had with African people for the last 600 years. When has there ever been a candidate running for mayor in a city that has represented that sector of the white population? So we finally got to see that sector of the white population. And just days after, the faces of hundreds of white people were lit up by tiki torches in Charlottesville, Virginia, chanting white power, hundreds of white faces were lit up by the Florida sun, marching through downtown St. Pete, chanting unity through reparations. And the white ruling class was absolutely terrified. They were terrified. Even though we were fringe, we were all these things, we were so insignificant, the chair of the Pinellas County Democratic Party called the Uhuru movement and the Uhuru candidates and our supporters domestic terrorists. And the president of the police union said that they're domestic terrorists. And they tried to cut time from Akile being able to answer responses at the Hilton debate in the Hilton Hotel in St. Pete because the audience was clapping too loud. They tried to take time away from her. And then they blocked me from participating in the only televised debate that happens during the local election in St. Pete. They prevented me from participating because they did not want the message of unity through reparations to be heard. They did not want that message to be heard, which is a testament to its power. Not only that, they interrupted Obama's latest yacht vacation to drag him into the St. Pete local election to endorse one of my opponents 4 days before the election. That was to stop the Uhuru candidates, not the Republicans, who are exactly the same as the Democrats. Another question that was brought up in this election that's very important, because I was running, the main opponent was this guy named Rick Kreisman, and he's a Jewish guy. And my last name is Neville, it used to be Novelsky, and I come from a Jewish background. So during one of the debates, I turned to him, and I turned to the audience, and I asked the question that if it is so normal and acceptable for my people and Rick Kreisman's people to receive reparations from the German government for the crimes that were committed against the Jewish people in Europe in the 1940s, then why should anyone have a problem with reparations to black people for the crimes that have been committed against the black community? Why should anyone have a problem with that? And beyond that, that reparations is not just payout or material compensation, although it is that. But before you get to that, you have to acknowledge that a crime has been committed. And because reparations were paid to the Jews, although the legitimacy of that can be debated as well in a separate discussion, but although reparations were paid to the Jews, no one would ever say that although the concentration camps were bad, the real problem was Jew-on-Jew crime.
Well,
and if the 3 girls who died in that pond in St. Petersburg, Florida had been Jewish, they would not have said that the Jewish mothers should have been better parents and taken more responsibility for their Jewish children. Yes. Because there is an acknowledgement that a crime was committed against the Jewish people. And a crime that far outsizes the scope of anything that has ever happened inside Europe was committed against African people. And reparations are owed to African people. So I know my time is up. So finally, what I would like to say is that one of the most important things that came out of this campaign, because the point was not to raise issues, by the way. The point was not to make a statement. The point is to win. And that is still the point. So even though the election is over, the struggle is not over. And we are building the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and we are building communities united for reparations and economic development, which is led by Akile in St. Petersburg, Florida, to continue invading this electoral arena with the politics of unity through reparations. And that means that no white person will ever be able to mutilate the term progressive again by excluding reparations from the center of the definition. Reparations is the new definition of progressive.
Yes.
And no white person now, from here on out, can claim to be a socialist and oppose reparations to African people. Bernie Sanders, I'm talking to you. And if I met Bernie Sanders, I would smack the word socialist out of his mouth. Because you can't be a socialist and oppose the ultimate redistribution of the wealth to the workers of the world, which is reparations to African people. And no white person will ever be able to claim to be an anti-imperialist or a radical or a revolutionary without uniting with reparations to the black community. And this is the doorway to the human family. Reparations is for us to join the human family. Because we don't get to just come back in after hundreds of years of lynching and raping and pillaging and destroying and say, all right, I'm here. I unlearned my racism. I'm dating a black person. I have a Black Lives Matter sign. I put on a hoodie and grew a bad goatee and rapped horribly about Donald Trump in a garage. I'm cool now. No, reparations is the way. Reparations is the solution. Reparations is the way into the human family. So I genuinely appreciate everybody for being here, and I'm very excited to hear our next two speakers, and I'm very excited to hear from all of you later tonight when we open up for Q&A. Uhuru.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sophie. Really incredible. That campaign was amazing. I got to go there this summer and go door to door with the candidates. It just was mind-blowing, and it's not over. So next up, I'd like to bring the chair of the Committee for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls, and also the chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, or CURED, and member of the African People's Socialist Party. Please welcome Akile Anayi.
Uhuru. All right, unity through
Reparations.
Unity through
Reparations.
Uhuru salute to Uhuru Solidarity Movement Boston chapter. I just want to say amazing work packing this room today. And I just really appreciate all the hard work, acknowledging the local chapter president, Hallie, for this amazing work. Also, Casey, my secretary for the Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls campaign, and dynamic leader in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, as well as the African People's Solidarity Committee. And I'm sure Boston will miss you. And I want to salute our other forces, Amanda, and just every member who is a part of this branch of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And for all of you for being here at this very important event, which, again, no matter, regardless of how you found out about it, you are here, we assume, because you see the conditions around you and you want to take a principled stand and solidarity with African people to end these conditions that you see. And before I go into my presentation, I also want to salute Chairman Amalia Chitella of the African People's Socialist Party. For the leadership and the vision of creating the African People's Solidarity Committee 41 years ago. And with that being said, also Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and as well as saluting my comrade and Vice Chair of CURE, Jesse Neville. And as he touched on it, not touched on it, but explained, we in the last 6 months were engaged in serious cadre building development and waging this campaign, Unity Through Reparations, in a majority white city. And it wasn't a small task, and in fact, it got national and international coverage because you had a 20-year-old African woman in the South running on a platform of reparations alongside a 27-year-old Jewish, man in the South on a platform of reparations to African people. That caught global attention. And it caught global attention not because of the fact that, it's some kind of phenomenon of, oh my God, reparations, but because it's telling of the period that we are in, that the masses of the people in the world are rising up against the system, and that reparations has always been the term on the lips of African people in this country and around the world. And Chairman once, said this quote, that white power is dying, and I'm going to help kill it. Mm-hmm. And to say that, we've talked about it. We've said the crisis of imperialism. That is the era that we are in. That's why Unity Through Reparations got such global attention, because we are in the crisis of imperialism. And as the Uhuru movement, as the African People's Socialist Party, as a colonized African person, the crisis of imperialism does not frighten me, does not frighten African people, because we understand that we have the responsibility to take advantage of the crisis of imperialism and take the whole damn thing down. That's why when, this man named Donald Trump was elected into office, African people were not in a period of hysteria. Because one, African people were catching hell under Barack Hussein Obama. And African people were catching hell under every other U.S. imperialist president. And African people in this country and around the world have been catching hell since the emergence of Europe, since the emergence of an America, since the emergence of white power. So seeing something like Donald Trump was not something shocking. It was very telling of the period that we're in. Because we saw the two sectors, the Democratic and the Republican Party, fighting each other, and the Republican Party fighting Donald Trump, despite the fact that he ran on the Republican Party ticket. And we saw the whole uneasy equilibrium unfolding before our very eyes. And that's because a foundation that rests upon rape, that rests upon theft, and that rests upon genocide is shaking. And it can no longer function as it has for 600 years. And masses of people are rising up and resisting colonialism and imperialism. The colonized and oppressed masses of the world are fighting for a future absent of the horrors that we are subjected to on a daily basis. This is a reality that cannot be disputed. Regardless of if you want to believe it or not, it's something that's happening. You see it in Korea, you see it in Palestine, in Afghanistan, and Nicaragua, and Azania, and you saw it in 2014 when they murdered Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. That is the crisis of imperialism, and that is the masses of people rising up against colonial oppression. And all of this type of resistance, it sends imperialism in a state of panic because it sees that it can't function anymore. The U.S. has to sit down and meet with, the leaders of all these different countries that they have otherwise colonized and looted historically. Now they have to sit down and meet with the leaders because they can't just go in and bomb the country as usual. And it's just very, very telling. And what's worse for the dying social system, not only are the people rising up, but for 45 plus years, the African People's Socialist Party has provided political organization. Because resistance absent of organization is anarchy. Mm-hmm. And resistance absent of the leadership of the African working class is the white left.
Yes.
Both to which only aid this system in carrying out the genocide of African people by stuffing us in prisons, poisoning our water, drowning our children, or gunning us down in the streets. Mm-hmm. And the party has been engaged in crushing anarchy and crushing the white left through the theory of African internationalism and providing a vision, but not just a vision, but a physical, tangible foundation for a world free of all forms of oppression. And we're going to talk about it a little bit today in terms of just a tangible building that we are engaged in, not just in St. Pete, Oakland, Philadelphia, but now we're embarking on in St. Louis. The African People's Socialist Party and the African working class is forwarding the revolution to make all of this happen. Because African people are clear, colonized masses around the world are clear that revolution is the only solution. We can't vote our way out of it. We can't sing our way out of it. Revolution, overturning this entire social system built on violence, has to be overturned. There's no reforming this relationship, this parasitic relationship. There's no reform. It's going to take revolution. The social system has got to go, and the masses of people are coming to that same conclusion. And of course, when your dreams and your aspirations are built on the pedestal of that crashing system, you may feel a bit anxious, overwhelmed, depressed, and finding yourself in bars, drinking yourself to death, or in an alley, overdosed on opioids. Because the future of imperialism is death. It's death. However, 41 years ago, the African People's Socialist Party formed an organization as a part of a strategy to forward the advancement of the African Revolution. It was an organization that answered the popular question, well, what about white people? When all of this is going on and the masses of people are rising up and our future seems bleak, what about white people? Well, the African People's Solidarity Committee was formed 41 years ago to answer that question. And it has laid out the role of white people in solidarity with African people. To stand in material solidarity, and we talked about it today, that it's not about how you feel and unlearning the ideas that are in your head based on the social system. It's about you materially supporting and standing in solidarity with African people through reparations. Because everything that white people have is stolen. Europe was built from, everything was stolen. Europe and the white world was living under feudalism. And it rescued itself by attacking Africa, by slaughtering the indigenous people, by going into Asia, by going into South America, by going into these various places around the world and committing genocide and stealing all those resources, and it maintains itself through that same relationship today. And also the task of white people is to organize other white people. You have to go into your communities and organize other white people to the stance of solidarity with African people, of reparations to African people. And it can be possible. We have to have unending faith because African people are serious about being free. And we are serious about being self-governing. We are not playing. But white people can play a role in that. And as it's been said, rescue yourselves from, what is the imperialist death hole through reparations to African people. And that also means organizing other white people to the same stance. And it's to work and to fight to return all the stolen wealth back to African people under the leadership of the African working class. I have to make that very clear. White people cannot lead the struggle for African liberation. You can't do it. That's not a principled stance in solidarity. And the reality is, white people, if African people had, to rest our eggs under the leadership of white people, we would be sold out every time. We would be manipulated every time. And that's what the white left is. That's what your Black Lives Matter is. They can lead you down that road because it doesn't mean anything. Because at the end of the day, you can chant Black Lives Matter till you're blue in the face and go back home into the suburbs and live on the pedestal of African people. Yes. It's just that simple. African people have to lead and define that struggle. So the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement offer white people the ability to join the rest of humanity, relieving you of your own imposed isolation from the rest of the world. It gives white people the ability to unite with the total liberating agenda of the African working class versus the parasitic agenda of the white ruling class. It holds white people accountable to African people and establishes the basis for a principled political relationship to colonize people versus the current relationship of colonizer and colonized. This is not a club. This is not a situation where you're coming in on your own opportunist agenda to make friends with African people and to build subjective relationships with African people because you want to feel good about yourself. Because the work, it has to get done. And sometimes it's hard work that you have to do, but because you want to see a better future. And because you know it's out there, because the vision is so positive, and it's one of the most clearest, most positive visions you have ever had. Because imperialism doesn't have a positive future. And to say that you're united through reparations to African people means you're united with the task as a white person, because no African mother should have to bury her child. No African family should be forcibly evicted through gentrification. No African child should suffer 12 years in the colonial education system. No African trans person should be subject to colonial violence, because African people have the right to have power over our own lives, the right and the means to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. That's why you joined this organization. And that's why you stand with Unity Through Reparations. It's for all of those things right there, because you believe of a future intolerant of that. And that it's not for your own heart's sake of seeming like a good white person while still living at the expense of African people. And one of the clear signs is when you see gentrification happening before your very eyes, and then the same gentrification where a new condo is being built or a new business is being built where an African family has been displaced, you see a Black Lives Matter sign right there. That's the biggest slap in the face. You just gentrified and moved out an entire African community, and gentrification is violent. Yes. It's extremely violent, and you put a Black Lives Matter sign in front of your store, but that makes you a good white person. That's why we're so completely different from any other organization out there, because you have to take a principled stand and actually work and fight to be comrades and to win reparations to African people. And again, African and colonized people are not looking for white friends. We're looking for comrades who are going into the belly of the beast to overturn the social system. We are building white solidarity with Black power and creating institutions for an independent African economy, for a future for African people. And whether you know it or not, as a white person, this is where your interests lie. Because when you take a look at the contradictions in the so-called oppressed sectors of the white community, like white women, white LGBTQ, white disabled, etc., you're looking at a contradiction with white power imperialism, and Black power is coming to tear that shit down. When you look at the suffering environment, abused animals behind glass tanks, poor health care, you're looking at a contradiction of capitalism, which is an economic system birthed from the first African slave turned commodity. African people are engaged in overturning our inherited history of the slave. So white people have to reject the inherited history of the slave master. You have to no longer want to be complicit in the system of genocide, while even your future looks great and bleak. So, last thing, I'm sorry, I'll be done. In St. Pete, as it was mentioned, the electoral campaign Unity Through Reparations gave the chance for white people to take hold of the life raft of humanity. The party created this opportunity 41 years ago with the creation of APSC, and we're extending it now to white people in Boston to take the stance of reparations to African people and to commit other white people to take this stance, because Africa and her people have to be free. The indigenous and Mexican peoples need their land back. Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan are demanding the end to the ongoing imperialist wars on their countries, and colonized people will see victory. But as a white person, you have to decide which side of the line you'll choose to stand on. The side of the oppressed, fighting like hell to take down the system whose victory is inevitable, or the oppressor, a side without a future. Thank you so much. Uhuru.
Thank you. How are we doing? Wow, this is so incredible, and it's like there's still more. Like, it's amazing. Thank you so much, Akile. Now it is my incredible honor to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, the revolutionary leader without whose vision, theoretical worldview, and strategy to win revolution in his lifetime Without that, none of us would be here today. The founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, who provides leadership for the entire world revolutionary struggle, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru. I'd like to, first of all, express my appreciation to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement here in Boston, to acknowledge the incredible work that you've done to make this event happen, and the work that you've done, obviously, before that, to be able to bring this crowd here, the work you've done around the justice for the 3 drowned black girls that you've introduced to this community. I really want to express my appreciation for that. I appreciate the fact that you were able to bring the incredible Penny Hess here. I met Penny Hess something like 41 years ago or so in Louisville, Kentucky. And she has been consistently a part of this movement and has been assigned to various places throughout this country, has taken the movement to Europe, organized African People's Solidarity Day, or rather Day in Solidarity with African People in Poland, has been responsible for going into Africa with us to take the struggle and to give evidence that white people do not have to be colonizers. And so that's been very powerful. It's just been an extraordinarily powerful force, because up until the time when Penny Hess came into this work, we had a situation where white people made this horrible assumption, and we call them ideological imperialists, Ku Klux communists sometimes. There's an assumption that they were the only ones who could speak for African people, and it was they who would define what our reality is and what our future should be. So Penny Hess boldly stepped outside of that process and began to organize the African People's Solidarity Committee under our leadership. And for that, she was characterized by a sector of the left in this country, as they were characterized, as being a part of an organization of white lesbians working under black male leadership. That was one of the slanderous things that were thrown in her direction. And also claimed to be kind of crazy because white people would not work against their own interests by being under the leadership of black people, which is an extraordinary statement. This was coming from frothing at the mouth, extraordinary communist white leftists, and somehow to work under the leadership of African people somehow was working against their own interests. So Penny has been doing this work for a very long time. And I'm extremely happy that you had an opportunity to bring her here. And of course, comrades Jesse and Akile, just extraordinary young people who are part of a mass of younger people who are coming into our party and our movement, replenishing our ranks. Otherwise, you'd just be seeing geriatrics like myself. So I want to thank you. I want to thank all of you for coming out. This is really important. This whole concept of Days in Solidarity with African People. It's a concept that's designed to bring white people, North Americans as we like to say, into our process. Could you bring me that water, please? To have this opportunity to speak to you. Because I know there are a lot of people who think that they've demonstrated solidarity with African people because they voted for Obama. Something like that. There was an assumption that somehow unlearning racism and what have you was in solidarity with African people. But we are a revolutionary organization. And I'm the chairman of an African People's Socialist Party. And the African People's Socialist Party does not only exist inside the United States. We have organization in what is called South Africa.
We have organization in Eastern Africa, in Kenya in particular. We have organization, developing organization in Uganda. We have organization in Sierra Leone, in West Africa. We have organization in England. We have organization in Sweden. We have organization in France and Germany. We have organization in the Bahamas and also here inside the United States. And we have this kind of organization because the fact is that an assault was made on Africa. I'm here today. I am not indigenous to these lands, as quietly as it's kept. I'm here today because Africa came under attack. And this attack resulted in the African nation being dispersed around the world against our will. Forcibly dispersed around the world. We've been divided and separated. We've been divided and separated from Africa, and in Africa itself we have been divided and separated. There have been created in Africa false national consciousness by Europeans who came to Africa, and as a part of what Karl Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation of capital, that explains how capitalism got started, because as quietly as it's kept, God, Jesus, Allah did not visit Europe and white people and bestow upon you tremendous amounts of wealth. How the hell did it happen? How do we explain how Europe and white people live with these conditions and circumstances as compared to Africa in particular and the rest of the world? Yeah. And of course, George Bush and Donald Trump would have you believe, and these ideologues would have you believe, it's because, as Bush would say, speaking of America, we are good, right? This is a thing I was burdened with for most of my life, my youth, having to answer the question. Every place I looked around the world, I saw people who looked like me. We lived under the most worst kinds of conditions. Poverty, despair, imposed violence, all of that. Starvation was our reality on the one hand. And then when we look around the white world, we saw just the opposite. People who were living well. And what explanation do we have for this? And of course, the explanation given then, quite forthrightly, up front, is that this reality exists. The difference in the conditions of existence of Africans and white people is because white people are more civilized. That's simple. Everybody should know that. White people are just more civilized, and white people are thrifty and save their money. And Africans do not. We waste our money on Friday nights and et cetera, et cetera. This is the nonsense. This is stuff that we were fed. You think about every African child born with this assumption, trying to understand what the hell is going on in the world, and every white person in the world born with this assumption. And what this does in terms of our relationship and even ability to come together to solve fundamental problems that exist in society. Because I want to be free. Yeah. But what I'm told is what I really need to be is white or like white. Mm-hmm. Because white people are more civilized. White people are thriftier. And that is the way forward. And it just wasn't something that was done to African people in South Vietnam, for example, under the French, or under the Americans. We're a situation where people go to the barbershop to have their eyes rounded so that they look like more like Europeans. I mean, this is what colonialism does. It's a filthy, nasty kind of process where you have a situation where one group, a society, lives at the expense of another group. And as we know, when you talk about society, you're talking about something that's comprised of an economic base, and a superstructure. And the economic base is how that society secures what it needs to live, exist. What it takes to have food, clothing, and shelter. And the superstructure is something that responds to that economic base. All of the institutions, the legal institutions, the culture, the ideology of that society springs from the kind of economic base it has. So if you have an economic base that comes from slavery and colonialism, then the ideas that exist in that society, the institutions, the legal institutions, etc., respond to that reality. Yeah. And if you really want to know what's happening in the world today. When you look at how people like to think that Trump is doing all these things, Trump, that's the American government. You understand? Donald Trump, that's the American government. Yes. Some people don't like that Trump represents the American government, damn it, that's the American government. Just like Barack Hussein Obama was the American government. He was the American government when he stood up in Harlem at the first presidential debate and answered the question that was raised to all of the candidates there of whether they supported reparations or not, and Obama said no. He said no because he cannot be dealing with these historical wrongs because that creates divisions in the society. And then after that, he hopped on an airplane and ran to Miami and kissed the feet of the Zionists there, promising he was going to give them all of Jerusalem. So we have a social system that's born of slavery and colonialism. And I'm talking about a system that when most people around the world outside of what we now know as Europe met the people who we came to know as Europeans later on, because there was no such thing as Europe at this time, when most people met what we came to know as Europeans, Europeans lived under feudalism. That was not pleasant. 1,000 years of extreme poverty, where it is literally true. You've seen this reality thing they call Naked and Afraid, where in Europe it was literally true. During feudalism, at a certain time, people were literally naked, had nothing to wear. When we met Europeans, there was no such thing as a man's home is his castle. The reality is that the ordinary European, what we now call European, owned nothing. The landlords, nobility owned all the land. And the peasants and serfs stuck on that land. And while they weren't like slaves, they were the next closest thing to slaves. And so they had no mobility. And what they produced, the majority of it went to the landlord. This is the whole mythological Robin Hood, springs from this era, where the noble Robin Hood, sort of like a social worker, who runs around robbing the rich to give to the poor. And the only one who has a job is Robin Hood. And of course, he can only be successful as long as there's rich and poor, right? But here you have the mythological Robin Hood. And the sheriff from Nottingham taxing everybody and what have you. This was a miserable set of conditions that Europeans were confronted with. And I'm mentioning this because it flies in the face of all the nonsense that we have heard. Europeans being chased out of Europe by some intellectual itch. They wanted to see what was on the other side of the world, etc., etc. It was poverty and disease that chased Europeans out, what we now know as Europeans out of Europe. I'm talking about in 4 short years. Between 1347 and 1351, half the white people on the planet Earth died of plague. You can't have a successful economy if half the people are dead or dying. Everybody was dying. The dogs and horses and cows were dying. And the Pope, despite the special relationship that he claimed to have with God, got out of the Vatican because he didn't want to meet him or her. And so Europe was in a severe state of despair. And all kinds of things came from that, by the way, that, you know, we could talk about on another occasion. But then you had that, and then for the next 50 or 100 years, that and other plagues swept Europe. And so this notion that somehow Europe, with a surplus of civilization and Christianity, set upon the world, Rudyard Kipling called it the white man's burden. So I don't want to do it. But it's the burden of being white. I've got to go out and take this civilization and Christianity to the heathens and what have you. So this is the mythology that sprang from this thing. And so now you have Europe, what we now call Europeans, which was previously a place where there were warring tribes, groups of tribes, who identified themselves primarily in relationship to each other. The Normans, the Visigoths, the Celts, and what have you, primarily identified themselves primarily in relationship to each other. And then you've got these, I guess you might call them entrepreneurs today. They've been referred to as pirates and other kinds of things, who set out and began to capture black people. Portugal, some 600 years ago, in 2015, 600 years ago, initiated the capture of black people. But you had not just that. You had this other colonizing process of looting expeditions that went out through what we now refer to as the Americas, taking gold, silver, whole peoples have been disappeared as a part of this process. And this is the basis of which you saw all these resources now swinging into Europe. And so, whereas there was wealth and capacity throughout what we call the Americas today, now it's gone. And wealth and capacity has been transferred from there to Europe. Then you had Europeans, part of a surplus population that came to this land that we stand on today. White people are not indigenous to this land. In fact, the indigenous, we don't even talk about them unless they're in the room. They live in concentration camps that are euphemistically referred to as Indian reservations. Up to now, that's the reality that we're talking about. I'm speaking of the foundation of a social system. You want to know why America is perpetually in war, why Europe is perpetually in war. This is the foundation, all of the wealth. They didn't just create the ruling class here. In fact, the ruling class here, ancestors of that ruling class, decided at some point, hey, this is a lucrative looting process that we're involved in. Why the hell should we be paying taxes to the King of England? Why the hell should we be sending these resources back to England? Let's keep it for ourselves. And so they fought a democratic, if you will, war. They initiated a struggle for free trade. They initiated campaigns that would contest the feudal nobility for control of the resources that were being pumped out of here and various other places around the world. This is the origin of this nasty social system called capitalism. So you had a group of people now wealthier, stronger, more powerful than the queen, than the kings, and what have you. And they are ones who thrust into motion a different kind of production that forced the peasants and the serfs off the land in Europe. And they had to come off the land in Europe because they needed them, making chains to put on black people, making boats to send out to capture African people who were to be enslaved, and making ships that would go other places for colonial booty. They created cities, every place, to facilitate that. This is what escalated and developed this whole process called the Industrial Revolution. And this is what freed. This is really important, because you had born from this process the white ruling class, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, was born from this process. But not only was the capitalist class born from this process, the white working class was also born from this process. That is its origin.
Yes.
Karl Marx once said that what he characterizes, an interesting characterization, wage slavery in Europe, he said, required as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. The capitalist system required this as a pedestal. The white workers required this as a pedestal. This is why the Marxists talk about how capitalism was progressive. They talk about the stair-step version of the development of society and then capitalism was supposed to be progressive. How can capitalism be progressive when it killed whole peoples all over what we now know as the Americas were destroyed, wiped out, do not even exist anymore? How can it be progressive when you have a situation where if you could see under the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Africa to the Americas, you would see a highway of bones? How can they claim that capitalism resulted in the greatest productivity in human history, when what capitalism did was take millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people out of the productive process altogether, unless they're saying that there would be no production if there were not white people in charge? So it's nonsense. You know that. I know I'm speaking to people of the choir. But that is the reality that we've been working with all this time, whether we knew it or not. So out of this sprang this thing, this whole capitalist system, and various economic and political structures that have been tweaked, modified over a period of time. I want to say something about Africa, because Africa was the critical component of the process of development of capitalism. It was the trade in African people that created the world economy that was linked together, that was a precondition for the rise of capitalism as a world economy. It was the trade of black people that did this. And it was the captivity and dispersal of African people all around the world. And it was a lucrative, a highly lucrative kind of process that resulted in struggles, all kinds of struggles among people who are now known as Europeans, because they're increasingly not identifying primarily in relationship to each other, but now they're achieving a common identity in relationship to the Africans who are being enslaved and other people who are colonized. And this common identity is being solidified off of the economic booty that's coming in, creating this whole new economic system throughout the world. This is the kind of relationship we're looking at. It's a parasitic. Capitalism is parasitic. V.I. Lenin, who likes to talk about how imperialism represents the highest stage of capitalism, he says, we say, no, Lenin was wrong. Capitalism represents the highest stage of imperialism. It was empire. It was empire that created capitalism. It was empire. It was the looting of Africa, the Americas, and all these other places that sent all these resources into Europe and into what we now know as the Americas. And so we're having this discussion today at a time when there's a severe crisis impacting on this whole social system. And we're trying to understand it. People are experiencing tremendous amount of anxiety. You can see in the popular culture that Europe and America, as it's called, cannot see the future. In the popular culture, we see this reference to a time when imperialism was strong and powerful and capturing the world, so they go back to Superman and Iron Man and all these other kinds of extraordinary superheroes from the past. Imperialism at one time was powerful in the past. And then when they try to show the future, it's the living dead. It's zombies. It's apocalyptic is the future, because they can't see the future. They can't see the future because their future is the future of a parasite that requires a host in order to survive, and the host is resisting around the world, which is why you see perpetual warfare going on everywhere. That's why they're killing people in Afghanistan, and they're killing people in Iraq, and they're threatening to destroy Iran, and they're talking about obliterating the people of Korea, and they're disrupting life and destroying lives in Venezuela. It is Yemen. All of this is not from strength. It is not an imperialism that's on the upswing. It is an imperialism that's fighting for its very life. That's what we're looking at. That's why we're not afraid. Because we don't want imperialism to survive. We don't want it to survive. We don't like the oppression and exploitation that we see in human society. That's why we're having these discussions. That's why you go to other discussions too. Some people I know in here are just sort of information consumers. But I suspect there's somebody who's really serious about wanting to know how to change the world. And we need to get to the origin of the contradiction in order to be able to change it. They just sent from this country, not too long ago, a spaceship. I don't remember how long it took to get there, but they sent it to, what was it? No, Jupiter. They said to the out edge of the solar system, to the end of the solar system, they sent a spaceship there. And of course, you and I know that part of the reason they do this stuff is to achieve military high ground, and also looking for minerals and stuff like that. But there is another scientific aspect of it. And they say because they get to Jupiter, they can begin to understand how this whole thing started, how life and Earth came into existence. And that's important information to have if you are looking at managing the globe, managing the world. And if you're talking about how to change the circumstances that we live in, then you need to get to the origin of the contradiction. That's why we're having this discussion today. It shouldn't be demoralizing to anybody. It should help us to be able to say, okay, it won't help to just walk around saying black and white unite and fight. That's a shallow kind of slogan that doesn't speak to the concrete conditions that brought us here today. It won't help for us to tell lies to each other like we've become accustomed to doing. We don't talk about the world the way it really is. We talk about the world like we like for it to be. And so so-called political leaders feed us pablum. But, we are mature people. And we want real solutions. Yes. Not just to explain the world, but to arm us to change the world. Yes. We need to know how to change the world. I was once an organizer of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. Some of you may have heard of that organization. It was an organization that in 1966 raised the slogan, Demand Black Power, that really shook everybody. Not only in this country, but it was something that affected people around the world. And I'll never forget these erudite spokespersons, news people on TV, Walter Cronkite, others, Chuck. What do they mean by black power? Well, see, you know what black is, right? You know what power is, right? Put them together, right? and just stupefied, by the whole notion. It's an absurdity to think of black people with power. But it's an extraordinary thing to imagine because of how things have been defined for us up to now by those who do have the power. And so I became involved in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I participated in organizing in various places throughout the South, mostly in Florida. And I saw a movement develop from the whole democratic rights struggle that they call the civil rights movement. I saw this as a movement that we had sectors, the liberal sector of the ruling class in this country that had its own task set for it, particularly in the 1950s and after the Second Imperialist World War, that they like to refer to as World War II, which was a war to redivide the world, which is essentially what it was. And the U.S. replaced Europe, and particularly England, as the economic center of the world. And all these resources that used to primarily go to Europe, because the Second Imperialist War destroyed much of Europe. Atomic bombs, as you know, dropped on Japan, took it out of action and what have you. And so the U.S. ends up more or less untouched. No war fought inside the United States, and it moves into these areas that have been dominated colonies of the U.S. It's now in India, it's now in Nigeria, it's now in all these other places and what have you. And as a consequence of this, tremendous amount of resources began to come to the United States. And they had to solve this critical problem of having all these resources, all these raw materials, how to transform these raw materials into finished products. They used to go to what they used to refer to as Central or Eastern Europe. But now Eastern Europe is part of the Soviet bloc, the Soviet Union. Is somebody here old enough to remember such a thing called the Soviet Union? It used to be a part of the Soviet Union. But they used to be able to get the resources. Now they have the Soviet Union, and they can't get the workers from there. So they turn to the south, the southern part of the United States, to get workers to be in those factories to transform the raw materials into finished products. But you can't do that easily, because inside the United States, capitalist production occurs in two distinctly different ways. In the South, it's labor intensive. In the North, it's capital intensive. And because it's labor intensive in the South, you need black people picking cotton, digging ditches, clearing swamps, doing all the dirty work there is to be done. And which means you don't need any black people with education, because education is even dangerous under those circumstances, right? And so it really blocks the process of development that's coming as a consequence of these raw materials. So you have now this sector of the bourgeoisie coming from the north, tied to northern capital. How are they going to be able to get the southern black people from the south to the north to work in the factories? How are they going to open up factories in the south and put black people in them when the relations of production in the south has been predetermined by the fact that it's labor intensive, which means no education, no nothing, just working like animals and been treated like animals. So they fund what they call a civil rights movement through a liberal sector of the African petty bourgeoisie of middle class. Malcolm X talked about that. And so now you have these resources coming. Hubert Humphreys and all these people are interested in black people having education, equal education, and going to the same schools and doing all this other kind of stuff, because they need people with enough education to work in the factories, etc. This is the basis for it. You want to know why the civil rights movement was based on philosophical nonviolence? I know, because Martin Luther King read something by Gandhi and he made good speeches. But the reality, it was based on philosophical nonviolence because it was funded by a sector of the white ruling class, and they were not about to fund anything. Any kind of movement that might even pick up a brick and fight back. They had situations where you have to even learn how to get beaten. I'm telling you, you are part of the civil rights movement, you're going on a demonstration, they had classes on how to get beaten. Like we weren't experts already. But by not fighting back. And so you had a sector of the African population, the African petty bourgeoisie, the African middle class, who saw success for itself as integrating into the capitalist system. And in order to do that, it needed access to elections and stuff like that. And it began this whole campaign of integration and voter registration and all these other kinds of things. And the African workers and poor people throughout the South became the forces that would wage this incredible, heroic struggle. But the problem was, you can't put a people in motion to change the world without the people themselves becoming changed. And so at some point, Fannie Lou Hamer was able to say, hey, we didn't come all this way for no 2 seats when everybody is tired. At some point, those people who were supposed to knock open doors to allow for this cozy relationship between the liberal sector of the white ruling class and the liberal sector of the African petty bourgeoisie to be consummated, all right, now began to move beyond. 1965, 1964, Civil Rights Bill. 1965, Voting Rights Bill. So the actual formal freedom that we're supposed to have has been realized. This is what the petty bourgeoisie wanted. This is what the liberal sector of the white ruling class wanted. But 1954, 64, voting rights, civil rights, 1965, voting rights, and in 1966, black power. The movement got away from them. It broke away from them. And it took on a whole different perspective and went to a whole different place. Because when you say black power, what you've just done is join with the anti-colonial movements happening all around the world. All the peoples around the world were fighting against colonialism, fighting for power, fighting to get the European American imperialists out of their countries. And black people say demanding power. It's totally African petty bourgeoisie you got, but you want what we want is power of our own lives. And that helped to transform the struggle here. So there's more to be said, and I hope we have an opportunity to say more about this. But you saw this progression continue. So by 1960, 65, 66, you see the emergence. Let me go to 65. The other thing that happened in 65 was in Lowndes County, Alabama, where the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, after having been betrayed by the Democratic Party in 1964 at the Atlantic City Democratic Party Convention, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee went into Lowndes County, Alabama, with the objective of building a black political party and to fight for black electoral politics. And it took a symbol, because the symbol for the Democratic Party of Alabama was a white rooster. And they took a symbol that represented strength and power and courage. And the symbol was a Black Panther. 1965, Lowndes County, Alabama. And the media began to refer to it as the Black Panther Party. This is the origin of the iconic Black Panther that you've seen that was associated with Huey P. Newton and the rest of them. This is where Huey P. Newton and the rest of them got the Black Panther slogan and Black Panther identity from. And this took the struggle to a much different place. So now we're not just talking about electoral politics. We're quoting Mao Zedong, who said that political power comes from the barrel of the gun. We're not talking about nonviolence as being the only way. We're trying to engage in revolutionary struggle. And then, of course, as you know, the United States government, once it was defeated ideologically and politically in the African community, unleashed a military assault on the Black Revolution. Assassinations became the order of the day. Mass arrests. We don't even know how many people were jailed during that period of time. And what's been seen subsequent to that was an expression of a defeated revolution. So now you have black people, politicians, and etc., who supposedly represent black people. But what they did was, in 1965, the very same time voting rights was being achieved, they were killing people who represented a genuine anti-colonial program with black people. They were killing Malcolm. They were killing Panthers. They assassinated the co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party. This is what was happening. So now our parties, our organizations are destroyed, and guess what? The only political party we got is what? The Democratic Party. Democratic Party is not a revolutionary organization. Never has been, never will be. And so what Malcolm talked about, what the Panthers talked about, all of that's been taken off the agenda, which is why Jesse and Akile were so important, because they took the politic of a defeated revolution and took it right back into the system, and this is what we've thrown back into their faces. I want to say that Africa, we are one Africa. We don't have a future unless we understand that. Africa is 12 million square miles when you count the islands. of extraordinary wealth and resources. They have been looting Africa now for hundreds of years, and they're still finding more to loot. Every cell phone, every computer that you see relies on resources that's coming from Africa, in particular from Congo. So you have this whole looting expedition, but we have been separated. We've been captured by the French and taken into this territory. We speak French now. We captured by the English-speaking, taken this by the Portuguese and taken to what they call Brazil. We speak Portuguese now. They carved up Africa into these 54 untenable entities that they call countries and states. They've created a false national consciousness among African people, so that you have in a place in West Africa where the Portuguese first went, and they discovered a lot of shrimp there. And they named the place for the Portuguese word for shrimp, which is Cameroon. And we have African people running around calling themselves shrimp. They are not shrimp. You look at Nigeria, which in 1915 was a place, there were two territories that England controlled. Sent a man named Frederick Lugard, who was from major corporations in England. He's the one who, by the way, defined and perfected the whole system of neo-colonialism, indirect rule by white power. They sent him to this territory to create one administrative whole. And with him was the woman that he would marry. Her name was Flora Shaw. And he's looking, and she was a well-known author for a name for this territory. And she said, why not nigger area? So people are now Nigerians. And then from now, we've gone from porch monkeys, jungle bunnies, niggers, coons, a whole host of things until we start moving toward Africa. And then Jesse Jackal, you call him Jackson, got together with a bunch of other people and decided that from now on we're going to be known as African Americans. And that hyphen is a chain. You can't be an African and American at the same time. That's like being a slave and a slave master. You can't get on a ship in Africa in 1619 as an African coming to this place and then get off the ship as a Negro. Then if we were Africans when we got on the ship in Africa, damn it, we were Africans when we got off the ship. We were Africans then, we are Africans now. And that's a critical question for us to understand. 1, 2, the future of Africa and African people is in the hands of the African working class. Yes. The African working class. That's the social force that creates all the value. That's who creates all the value. And they create value in a world economy where you have socialized production, people have to come together to produce everything, and private ownership of the means of production. That's a distorted kind of relationship. Those who produce don't have a damn thing, and those who don't produce anything got everything. And there can't be anything but disruptions in the society under those circumstances. So part of what we are about is making a revolution. But this revolution, what we've come to understand, is the origin of capitalism itself. And capitalism exploits every damn body. But the weakness of the struggle against capitalism around the world is white people who sit on the damn pedestal of the enslavement of everybody else. You got to jump off that damn pedestal and join with the rest of us to overturn white power so everybody can be free. The strategic force to destroy capitalism is the Black Revolution, which is a worldwide revolution because we are all over the world. And coming into our own consciousness and organization. I've over-talked it. Somebody's been trying to discipline me from over here, and I think they might have quit, surrendered, and left. But this is part of what we talk about when we say unity through reparations. We're giving you a reason for that. We say solidarity. We're talking about not ever wanting to be in a situation again where the Black Revolution is raising its head in a very serious way And it's possible for this or any other government to isolate that revolution because of the stance or non-stance by white people. You've got to get on board. I don't need any damn charity. I need somebody who's in solidarity with the struggle to overturn these chains that are on me and African people around the world. The United States has just been exposed that the FBI has created something that they call black identity extremists. That's domestic terrorists. And which if they've named it, they got a program already. If you read about they're talking about it, they already have the program. And it's already at work. But they will not be victorious this time as they were in the 1960s. And part of the reason they will not be victorious is because we're in this room today. And what's happening in this room today will be spread everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So, I want to, again, express appreciation to all of you for coming out. And I truly believe that victory is ours. Yes. The future belongs to the people. The most progressive thing that all of us can do is the struggle against colonialism. That's the only way we will know a future. The planet will be liberated. We live in a world where we got 80% of the people on Earth, 80% of the people on the planet Earth are trying to survive off $10 or less a day. 50% of the people on Earth are trying to survive on $2.50 or less a day. And if you're in Africa, you're lucky if you can earn a meal a day. That's got to stop. Yes. And we fight for a better world, because if you don't do this, then Trump and Obama and the rest of them are speaking for you. And you'll see more towers coming down. You'll see more acts of violence. And I'm not anti-violent. Don't make a mistake. I'm not a pacifist or a masochist, as Malcolm X might say. But what I'm saying is that we can be a part of the same process to bring the social system down. Join this struggle, join Black Power, and we can win. Thank you so much. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman Omali, to tell us. Give us another hand. Wow. Incredible. I'm sure we can all agree that we've all been deeply moved by what was said tonight. I've been in this movement a year and a half, and I just learned a ton of things just now. So we're, truly incredible. So next, I'd like to bring up our local membership coordinator, Casey Mackey, and Jesse Neville back up to speak about the question of material solidarity. And we're going to change it up here.
Unity through reparations! Unity through reparations!
Uhuru. I firstly want to salute the visionary leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onizade Yeshitela. She's not here, so we'll talk about her. She's not to be messed with, as I heard the chairman say earlier. And I want to salute the entire African People's Socialist Party, who have won us in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to see our future in the inevitable success of the struggle for African liberation and freedom for all of humanity in our lifetime. I also want to salute our incredible speakers, Akile Anai, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville. We've heard a really powerful testimony about the most pressing question for white people in these serious times, which is how to rectify our relationship to black people as their oppressors and take responsibility for hundreds of years of lynching and terror. This event has made so clear that anti-racism is not the answer, holding up a Black Lives Matter sign is not the answer, trying to take on black culture is not the answer. We don't need any more white rappers, Eminem. Reparations is the answer. And working under the black working class is the answer. That's very important. And I want to add that when Jesse and Akile were running for office, Jesse was running for mayor and Akile for District 6 City Council, but anyone that paid attention to that campaign saw that Akile was this clear strategic leader of the campaign, and the black working class was who led that campaign, and Jesse was working under Akile's leadership, and white people standing for unity through reparations was under the leadership of the black working class, and that principled relationship is reflected in the way that the Uhuru Solidarity Movement works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So when we look at the world and we see the social system in severe crisis, it can seem like everything's hopeless. But then we look at what the Uhuru movement is building, and all we see is a bright and positive future for African people that we can also be a part of. And the way we do that is reparations. Reparations is not something that the Uhuru movement is waiting to do in the future. It's happening right now. It's been happening for 41 years since the foundation of the African People's Solidarity Committee, winning white people to get the stolen resources in our communities and return them to African people so they can reclaim their communities on their own terms. That's our second point of unity, is African people have a right to lead their own struggle. This is not charity. It's the resources going back to African people, no strings attached, so they decide how the resources are used for their own liberation. And with these resources, the party is building dual and contending power in the hands of the African working class, which is on the rise in St. Louis. Black Star Industries is building an amazing foundation of a liberated African economy, what will be a vibrant, prosperous life for African people. It's building in St. Louis what they've already done in Oakland, Philadelphia, and St. Petersburg. Originally, Africans came to St. Petersburg. It comes with settler colonial violence. Gentrification is what led to the murder of Dominique Battle, Lanaya Miller, and Ashanti Butler, and every single black person that we see killed by the police every single day. So uniting with reparations is the honest stand against the murder of black children. So this process of getting these properties is very complicated, but under Deputy Chair Onazineye Shatella, who's straight from the working class, has the African working class brilliance and 45 years of experience of building black power institutions, she led the way, and Black Star Industries was able to acquire some of these properties. And this is from a 45-year track record of building self-reliant institutions. So the goal of Black Star Industries is to feed, clothe, and shelter African people. Like I said, this is not charity. It's about building organization and the ability of African people to be self-governing. The African People's Socialist Party knows that self-determination means having economic self-reliance, and a stage in history where gentrification is annihilating African communities all over the world. We see gentrification in every city, in Oakland, in Boston, in Jamaica Plain, in Eggleston Square, in Alston. Universities are taking over and pushing people out of their homes. But Black Star Industries is a weapon in the arsenal of oppressed people to fight back, and it puts power in the hands of the African community. We can see it for our own eyes with pictures that of the institutions that the party has built, not just in St. Louis, but in other various parts of the world. So Black Power 96, do you want to sit here? It's a little further back. We're off on the slides slightly.
We got a bit off. But
yeah, go back a few slides. This is the wrong PowerPoint.
Nice pictures.
There's Deputy Chair.
Right, Deputy Chair, I will describe it to you. So it's Black Power 96, which I had a picture of the station manager, Dia Kiese, who is doing amazing things with this station. It's a black community-controlled radio station in St. Pete, but you can have it anywhere in the world. It's an app you can get on your phone. And it is about, stories and talent from the African community where they can speak in their own voice and telling their own stories and serve their own struggle for self-determination. They have a program called My People's Keeper, which is about uplifting the voices of gender and sexuality non-conforming Africans and the severe violence and isolation they face on a daily basis. They have No Class, which is a black high school student-run program, which is amazing. And also the Burning Spear newspaper, which, since we don't have the PowerPoint, but you can buy a Burning Spear newspaper in the back
for $1, and the Burning Spear newspaper is another form of African working class controlled media that puts out their own narrative and their own struggle and serves as dual and contending power against white nationalist media. So we've talked about how culture reinforces the economic system. The media is a tool of the state to criminalize and dehumanize African people, so these institutions are dual power to go up against the white nationalist media. And the Burning Spear newspaper was the only paper that put out the truth of what happened to the 3 drowned black girls. There's also Uhuru Foods and Pies, which is about putting the means to grow, produce, and distribute fresh food in the hands of African people, to go against what is called food deserts, where African people are being starved. And this includes the goals to control their own land, farms, trucking, and distribution of food. And then there's Uhuru Furniture, 2 stores that contend with the gentrification of North Philadelphia and Oakland, 2 historically African communities that are being pushed out, because the furniture stores build an institution of economic development controlled by African workers, and thousands of people of all nationalities shop and volunteer at Uhuru Furniture, and they can host events there as well. And the resources generated from Uhuru Furniture go to fund the book fairs, health fairs, and One Africa, One Nation marketplaces that generate commerce for and between African people in these cities and provide free programs for education, health, sustainable economic development, and self-determination for the African community. And then, we actually do have this slide of the Uhuru houses in Oakland and St. Pete. It's okay, we can work with the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm trying
just,
to find the other one.
it's okay. I'm at the point where we're at the right one. So you can, yeah, we're caught up to the old one. So, beautiful. Go back a few slides. Not yet. There we go. Uhuru houses in Oakland and St. Pete. These are just crucial organizing spaces. They also provide an accessible, affordable space for the community to rent for events, anything you can imagine, weddings, birthdays, banquets, rallies. You know, there was a birthday party for what would have been Dominique Battle's 18th birthday. These are incredible. And now, there's an Uhuru house in St. Louis. And there it is right there. And that's the contractor building it. It's really incredible. I was really lucky. I got to go see it. It's amazing. You know, it's like they've taken this process with the LRAs where usually land developers would snatch up these properties and build condos like we see that gentrify the community, and they've turned it around and say, no, these are institutions that are going to belong to the people. So, the party's been in St. Louis for 3 years now after the killing of Mike Brown and the Ferguson Rebellion, and since then it's been the home of their mass organization, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and so the party's making this historic move to the Midwest and bringing all these cultural and economic hubs right into the heart of the impoverished African community. And across the street from the Uhuru House, next slide, are 2 buildings that will be leveled or demolished because they've collapsed in on themselves. And all of it will be an open space for an outdoor community venue and a lot for the One Africa, One Nation marketplace. And next slide is going to be the home of the new Uhuru Jiko Kitchen, a community commercial kitchen to be rented for affordable prices by aspiring black entrepreneurs. It will be the home of the Uhuru Foods and Pies and the future African Independence Workforce Program, which is like a training program to train formerly incarcerated African people who were victims of the colonial prison system and come out and usually have nowhere to go. They can't get a job. You know, it's slavery 2.0, but this is about bringing power to them and getting them jobs and training. So this is Black Star Industries on the move. They are developing and forging communities. They want to go to Chicago and Detroit, where these African communities have been decimated. And this is a tremendous victory for the African working class. Uhuru.
I'd really like to thank Casey Mackey and just say that Casey, in addition to being a local membership coordinator, is also the national chair of Reparations Economic Development of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And I also just want to say that that was an absolutely amazing presentation from Chairman Amalia Shatella. I'd like to give another round of applause. And thank you all for staying for this part of the program. This is extremely important, what we're talking about right now. And this is the part of the program where everything that we've talked about becomes real. That's what this is about. This is about reparations in action. And all of these institutions that KC has just talked about, the work of the Uhuru movement to build black political and economic power in the hands of the black working class. That is the answer to the question, to what end? So we're not just involved in protesting endlessly, which can actually be depressing and demoralizing. Yeah. Every single time, another protest. It becomes a routine. Whereas this is about ending a system so that protest becomes unnecessary, while at the same time building the foundation of the system that will come into being when this system is destroyed. And in history, whenever African people have managed to gain some semblance of economic life for themselves, which in spite of the colonial horror inflicted upon African people, Africans have tried to build their own economy, such as in places like Rosewood, Florida, or in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was prosperous to the point where it has been described as a black Wall Street in the 1920s. And in every instance, what the US government did, with complicity from the white population, was destroy it. We went in, and in many cases, we literally burned it to the ground and killed all the Africans. And in the case of Tulsa, that was the first time the US ever launched an airstrike inside US borders, was against African people in Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1921. And this time around, because the African People's Socialist Party is fighting for economic development and state power, the power to defend the economic gains made by the African working class in reclaiming their stolen wealth. And this time around, because the African People's Socialist Party has called upon us to play a role in making this happen, it will not go down like it has in every other case where African people have tried to create their own economy. This time around, we will not be the lynch mob of the white ruling class.
That's right.
Yes.
In fact, if the white ruling class comes in any form and attempts to attack what the African working class is building in St. Louis or in St. Pete or in Oakland or anywhere else, they will have to go through us first. And we will kick their ass. So when you join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, you're joining a worldwide network of white people like yourself who want to stand on the right side of history and who want to rectify the bloody 600-year relationship that we've had to African people. And one of the things that happened during the election in St. Pete that white people told me, and it's kind of frustrating, but it was revealing, that they supported what we were doing, they supported reparations, but they just couldn't come out and say it. They couldn't publicly say it. Meanwhile, white people are literally marching in Virginia chanting white power. They have the courage of their convictions to say where they stand. We have to have the courage in our convictions to say where we stand. And we have to be as loud and as proud in solidarity with black power as they are louder than them. Louder and more obnoxious than them. That's what we have to do. And through joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, through fighting for reparations to African people, that's what we have the opportunity to do, to be on the right side of history and to stand with the rest of humanity. And we should be proud of that. If they call us black identity extremists, white black identity extremists, sure, I'm a black identity extremist. If they call us domestic terrorists, then sure, I'm a domestic terrorist. If they call us white lesbians working under black men, then sure, I'm a white lesbian working under the leadership of black men. If that's what we want to call white solidarity with black power, bring it on. We are proud. So finally, as I said earlier, this is not charity, this is not a favor. This is how we end all forms of oppression, is through uniting with, as the chairman said, the most progressive social force on the planet Earth that is the only social force capable of leading the worldwide struggle to end all oppression. So paying reparations is how we connect ourselves to that and to the future of humanity. So now you will notice our lovely volunteers will be walking around and passing out some baskets, or standing with baskets and passing out the pledge cards. And now we would like to just briefly explain how you can join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, how you can contribute to the work of Black Star Industries that we just looked at. Okay, so here's how you do it. One, you can become a sustaining member. And becoming a sustaining member means that you contribute a monthly amount of reparations to the work of Black Star Industries, to the creation of an independent African economy, and to the African Revolution. And there's many different levels. We're going to go over those in a second, but it can be anything from $5 a month to over $100 a month, supporting these programs and institutions. Number two, if you are already a member, now is the perfect opportunity to upgrade your membership. And on the card, you would just put the amount that you're upgrading by in the total. If you want to become a member but not yet a sustainer, we also have the general membership and student/fixed income level. We try to make it very easy for anyone to join at any level. General membership is $25 a year, and student and fixed income is $10 a year to become a member, a card-carrying member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. You can also make a one-time donation. If you don't want to join at this time, but you want to support these programs, you can donate at any amount today. The other thing you can do is both, all of that, all of the above. Become a sustaining member, upgrade, donate a one-time amount today. You can do all of these things. Just make sure you put the total at the bottom of the pledge card. And you can also donate anonymously, of course. That's up to you. And in any event, you can pay by check. You make the checks out to Uhuru, U-H-U-R-U. You can pay by card. We have laptops in the back where we can process, Renee is raising her hand there, and Johan. We can process your information and get you set up as a sustainer or take your donation that way. And you can also, of course, pay by cash. Just make sure whatever way you choose to contribute that you fill out the pledge card so that we can keep track and so we can thank you for your contributions. So, now that you have those pledge cards, we have a goal tonight. Every Day in Solidarity with African People held throughout this country has a goal to raise resources. So I'd like to show you our goal tonight is not $1 million. $1 million, next slide, is how much white people donated to Darren Wilson to reward him for the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. To reward him for putting bullets in the body of an African teenager and leaving his body to bleed in the hot sun for 4.5 hours. White people, GoFundMe had to shut down his page because the money was flooding in from white people. So just as we said, we have to be louder and more obnoxious than the white nationalists who are emboldened in this period. We have to outmatch these white nationalists in putting our money where our mouth is. So today, our goal is 3,000.
Yeah.
3,000 of $1 million. Very doable. And we'd like to start with the Ella Baker level. Well, first of all, let me ask this question. Is there anybody in the room tonight that would like to donate $3,000? And that's a very serious question. It happens. White people have 22 times the wealth of the average African family. And that wealth is in the white world. In fact, last year, that happened at the DSAP event. So, anybody would like to donate $3,000. And if you don't want people to know you have $3,000 readily available to you, you can donate anonymously. Of course, fill out the pledge card. All right.
The basket passers will collect your pledge cards once you're finished.
All right, so we're calling you to become a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and the top level is Ella Baker at $100 a month or $1,200 a year. Who in this room would like to become an Ella Baker level sustainer? I'd like to give a few seconds in case people are deciding. Are you raising your hand? Johan! I'm sorry, can you say that? I shouldn't have said your name, that's just my friend back there, but can you say your name for the live stream?
Yeah, my name is Daniel Fun. Thank you.
So next,
You want to take it over?
So the next is the Marcus Garvey level of Uhuru Solidarity Movement, $60 a month, $720 a year, named for the great Marcus Garvey. And is there anybody who would like to become, all right, I guess you say your name for the audience, please.
My name is
Renee.
Renee.
Uhuru. So is there anybody that would like to be like Renee and join Uhuru Solidarity Movement and contribute $60 a month to the incredible revolutionary economic development institutions of Black Star Industries? All right.
all right, the next level is Fannie Lou Hamer at $40 a month or $480 a year. Who in the room would like to become a sustainer at $40 a month? Fannie Lou Hamer level. Back there, Uhuru, can you say your name for the crowd in the live stream?
My name is Rainer, and I would like to be upgrading my membership to Fannie Lou Hamer.
Right on! Thank you so much. Anybody else want to be Fannie Lou Hamer?
Was that a one-time donation? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. $40 tonight? Right on. Would you like to say your name for the live stream?
I'm Jordan. Hi.
Hi, Jordan. Uhuru. Thank you so much.
All right, Malcolm X. Malcolm X, $30 a month, $360 a year, basically $1 a day. $1 a day to reparations to African people.
I'll become
All right. Fallon. All right.
I see someone back there. Sir, can you say your name? That's my dad. You want to be Malcolm X level sustainer?
Absolutely.
Can you say your name for the live stream?
Ben Haskell.
Right on, Ben. Woo! Soon Malcolm X will be the most popular level. Currently, we'll get to the what is the most popular level in a minute. Hold your horses. Anybody else Malcolm X level? Uhuru! Right on! Would you like to say your name?
Oh, Susan.
Susan! Woo! Yes! A lot of Malcolm X in this room. I love it.
All right.
Yes! New most popular level. All right, since that just keeps going, who else wants to be Malcolm X level sustainer? Right on! Would you like to say your name?
My name is Charlie Walker, and I would like to be a Malcolm X sustainer at $30 a month.
Right on! Excellent. All right, anybody else? We're on a roll with Malcolm X. All right.
Uhuru, salute to all the new Malcolm X sustainers. So here's Keturah Carey. Keturah Carey was one of the co-founders of the African People's Socialist Party in 1972. And in honor of this historic and powerful leader of the African Revolution, we have named the $25 a month level of USM membership after Keturah Carey. So in honor of this magnificent leader, is there anybody who would like to become a Keturah Carey level member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement tonight? All right. Can you tell us your name?
My name is Mara, and I'd like to become a sustainer at the $25 level.
All right, Mara. Is there anybody else that would like to become a Keturah Carey member? All right. Good. Andrew. Uhuru. I feel like there's a third person somewhere. Anybody? Oh, wow. Okay. Can you tell us your name?
Teresa.
Teresa. Rosemary.
Okay, the next level is Queen Nzinga.
Yeah.
She is amazing. She fought for the liberation of Angola. She kicked Portugal's ass. Incredible military leader. I just want to say on African women, I have not met an organization that has more African women leadership than the Uhuru movement. It's just bursting to the seams with African women leadership. And so salute Queen Nzinga for being an incredible, brilliant military strategist. And who here would like to become a Queen Nzinga level sustainer at $20 a month? Or $240 a year? Uhuru, can you say your name?
I'm Chick. I'd like to upgrade my membership to $20 a month.
Right on! Woo. Anybody else at Queen Nzinga? All right, next level.
I think most of you are members by this point, so salute to this audience. So, named after Huey P. Newton, who was the leader of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, and who famously said in his last speeches, which took place at the Uhuru House in Oakland, California, he said that although the U.S. government had destroyed one organization, that they had failed in crushing the revolution. Because although the Black Panther Party did not exist, the Uhuru movement did exist. Yeah. And although the Black Panther newspaper did not exist, the Burning Spear newspaper did exist. Yeah. Yes. So he passed the torch. He understood that because of the chairman, because of the African People's Socialist Party, because of the Uhuru movement, that the counterinsurgency was being pushed back and that they would not succeed in crushing the revolution. So, in honor of that sentiment, which is clearly at work throughout the world now, is there anybody that would like to become a Huey P. Newton level sustainer of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, contributing $15 a month or $180 a year towards the work of Black Star Industries? All right, can you tell us your name? Ephraim. Uhuru.
I am.
Oh, can you
Yes.
tell us your name?
Jill Cowie.
Jill. Anybody else that likes to become a Huey P. Newton sustainer tonight?
All right. Just want to remind everybody that no matter what it is that you're doing or giving, to fill out your pledge card as soon as you can and give them to the basket passers so they can take them to the back, where our calculators will count up so we can announce our total of what we're raising for reparations tonight. And I just want to add that, this is not just another fundraiser. These are not donations. This is tied to the struggle to destroy white power forever. This is going to a black working class controlled economy, which is the dialectical opposite of a white ruling class controlled economy. So you're denying money to capitalist white power and putting it into the hands of the black working class revolution. There was someone that left the event last year saying, oh, this sounds like black capitalism, not realizing that under socialism, like capitalism, the workers don't own the means of production. In Black Star Industries, it is a socialist economy in which African workers own the means of production. And that these people that may call it black capitalism, I think the chairman said in his political report, would rather have African people remain starving and dependent on white power, instead of taking back their resources to build their own economy, to have the ability to feed, clothe, and house themselves as a free, self-governing people, which is exactly what Black Star Industries is doing. So with that being said, who would like to become our most popular level sustainer? Che Guevara at $10 a month. 2 right there. 3. Oh my gosh. Everybody loves Che. Can you say your name?
I'm Janet. I'm going to upgrade.
Woo! And can you say your name? Mike! Woo! Glad to be here. And I saw you? David! And chat with David for a while. It's great to meet you in person. All right. I saw there's a fourth one. Was there? Heather! Right on! Hashtag #BeLikeChe. Stand in solidarity with African liberation.
Yes.
All right. The last sustainer level is named for Steve Biko, who was an African freedom fighter in occupied Tanzania, or what colonialism refers to as South Africa. And in honor of Steve Biko, at $5 a month, you can become a Biko level sustaining member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So is there anybody in the room tonight who would like to do this, who would like to become Steve Biko USM sustainer? Okay, let that silence go a little bit longer that time. I think almost all of you are members. Salute.
And I know that my comrade David brought to me that someone that David does incredible outreach for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, so I just really want to salute David Rold and his and that he told me at the beginning that one of his associates couldn't come tonight, really wanted to be here, but wanted to pledge $100 to our goal tonight.
Woo!
As well.
Right on! 100 from right there. Can you say your name? That's Hallie's sister. 50 from Chairwoman Penny Hess. 20 from
Jackson.
I see a hand in the back.
Oh, yeah. Not yet.
Oh, check online.
Are there any online contributions to reparations in action?
Not yet.
All right. That's because no one's at home. They're all here.
Exactly.
So just make sure that if you have become a member, please sign up before you leave, which you can do right now. And as this section of the program, referred to as material solidarity, is complete. True. Yeah. To all of you, we are winning!
Wow. Thank you everyone for all your contributions and becoming members. You'll definitely hear from us soon to thank you and be part of our work. We have weekly meetings and we'll do some announcements later. But right now, it is my pleasure to introduce the national coordinator of this whole Day in Solidarity with African People campaign and national speaking tour. This comrade has done an incredible job coordinating this tour and who's also our cultural performance of the evening. Will be performing a song that he wrote. Please welcome Jackson Hollingsworth.
Uhuru! Unity through reparations! Unity through reparations! Uhuru!
Before you begin, I just want to make it clear that if you became a member tonight and would like to, we encourage you to do it right now. We have computers in the back. We can take your card info. So this is a good time where you can get up and do that. Just making that clear.
Yes, if you're paying up by card or joining and becoming a member online, visit the people at the back there with the lovely computers. Thank you, Hallie. Uhuru. All right, so this song is called Reparations Now. We know that we've been lied to. There's two realities. There's the one that we've been raised in and the one we pretend we don't see. We don't want the guilt, but our lives are built on murder, rape, and theft. To pretend is not an option now. We wonder what is left. Genocide is raging on without an end in sight. We shut down lots of highways. We hashtag every night. But every 18th hour we see white power kill Africans and go free. We want to know what we can do to stand in solidarity. Reparations for stolen land, for all the wealth we take in hand to build our cities, schools, and towns. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations for stolen names. All white people are to blame for stolen science, culture, sound. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations for stolen lives. Reparations for husbands, wives, and children killed and raped and drowned. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations, reparations now. Reparations now. Aha! Getting through! Getting through!
Thank you, Jackson. That was incredible. Very powerful. There's so many talented artists and musicians in our movement. It's really fascinating. Okay, so we're almost at the end of our program. I really salute everyone for sticking around till this. We will have a question and answer period at the end, and I just have a couple announcements I want to say right before then. So the first one is about the 7th Congress. Yeah?
We got a $100 pledge from Lisa.
$100 pledge from Lisa! Approved! Excellent. So, the African People's Socialist Party's 7th Congress will be next summer at the historic Uhuru House in Oakland, California. It is an awesome occurrence. It is the highest meeting body of the party, where all the membership comes together to sum up the last 5 years of work and to establish a direction for what the next 5 years is going to look like. It's the place where the most important decisions are made, with the maximum input and participation from all the party's membership all around the world. And the 7th Congress will be a week-long event, a historic event next summer in Oakland, so start saving up for that. More info will be coming out later. And a next event, next month, November 4th and 5th in Washington, D.C., will be the 8th annual Black is Back Coalition Rally, March, and Conference themed The Ballot and the Bullet, Elections, War, and Peace in the Era of Donald Trump. The rally and march to the White House that follows, and the conference on November 5th at Howard University will all promote Black community control of the police and as a just and democratic demand to halt the police murder of Black people, as well as Black community control of healthcare and the school system. Also in D.C. next year, March 24th and 25th, will be the historic first annual International Convention of the African National Women's Organization. Yeah, it's going to be great. And the theme of that is Building the Revolutionary Capacity of African Women. It will showcase the international scope of working-class African women on the front lines of the revolution, leading and building a future free from colonial domination. So that's March 24th to 25th in DC. We'll definitely be going down to that from Boston. You can probably join us on our travels. And so those are some national big events. We also have some local events that we'd love to have you at. We have next week, so our follow-up event after this will be next Tuesday, October 24th. We are hosting a viewing party of a live-streamed web conference put on by the Committee for the Justice of the Three Drowned Black Girls, and that the web conference is called 21 Years Later, The Battle of St. Pete Continues. The topic will mark the 21st anniversary of the police murder of 18-year-old Tyrone Lewis. That night, back in 1996, the African working class of St. Petersburg, Florida, rose up in a rebellion, which was highly politicized and very well organized thanks to the Uhuru movement. The guest speaker of this web conference next week will be Chairman Omalia Shatala of the African People's Socialist Party, and he'll lay out the timeline of the uprising in 1996, because he was there. So he'll be speaking about that, as well as the leadership of the Uhuru movement and the critical question of economic development that was raised during this period. He'll be joined by Chair of the Justice for the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign, Akile Anai. And again, that's Tuesday, October 24th, starting at 6:30 p.m. at Parts and Crafts in Somerville, 577 Somerville Ave. And we have flyers, I think, at our front table here. You can grab one.
And the back table.
And the back table. They're everywhere. And shout out to Sam Day for making those awesome flyers. Woo. And then 2 days after that, on Thursday, October 26th, we'll have our local chapter meeting from 7 to 8:30 at the Newsfeed Cafe in the Boston Public Library at Copley Square. At our weekly chapter meetings, we continue building this amazing movement for reparations led by the African working class. So come join us, plug into an event. We can help you host a fundraiser and just, we got to continue this work every day. And our final announcement of the evening is very big, both happy and a little bit sad, but mostly exciting, and a sign of the revolutionary change that is happening. So another, I didn't know that was happening. Do you want to announce it? Yeah.
So many events, I didn't even know.
And another announcement is APDEP, the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project, is holding its 10th anniversary national convention in Huntsville, Alabama, and that will be November 17th through the 19th. So that's being shared everywhere, and check it out. You can register at on the link on Eventbrite. If you look up All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project, you will find all of the information you need for that to register for this historic convention, November 17th through the 19th, Huntsville, Alabama. Uhuru.
Thank you. Yeah, I was unaware that was happening, but that just shows how many awesome stuffs are happening at the same time. Awesome stuff, yeah. So, yeah, the last announcement before Q&A, as was said earlier, our incredible comrade Casey Mackey has been hand-picked by the African People's Socialist Party as the best candidate to move to St. Louis, Missouri, which we saw the buildings that the movement is building there. She was chosen as the best candidate with the task of growing and building the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is just such an incredible task. And Casey's also like my best friend and my housemate. I'm gonna cry. And Casey is our local membership coordinator. She's been a critical part of the success of our chapter here. Casey and I met last summer as two individual members. There wasn't a chapter yet. We just were individuals. And we held our first outreach table last summer. And then from there, we met Comrade Renee, who's in the back here. And the three of us worked together to build the first Day in Solidarity with African People event last year. Just the three of us put on a similar event like this. And from there, we consolidated our chapter in December. And since then, Casey's put on incredible dance parties for reparations and has done fierce outreach for all our events. And Casey's departure and leaving our Boston chapter will be deeply felt by all of us. But we're going to be on phone meetings like daily, so it's not really. And she's still going to be our social media coordinator from afar. And she knew I was going to do this announcement, but she didn't know that I made her a calendar and had all of us sign it for you so you don't forget us. And so that's actually some of us still need to sign it. So we really salute Casey. changed my life. We helped each other so much. And with that, we have an open position in our Boston chapter. We need a new membership coordinator. So please, if you're interested in filling this position, we can teach you all about it. You know, we all formed a chapter last year. We never had done it, but we just learned. And maybe while Casey's here in the next month, she can train you. And we have other roles. We have tons of roles if you want to plug in. You know, just talk to me, talk to us after the event. So that's my final announcement. And with that, I would like to bring up Chairwoman Penny Hess to facilitate the question and answer period. We are going a bit over time right now, so maybe we can keep it to 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll wrap up. So, and actually, yeah, we'll have the...
Thank you, Hallie, and I just want to salute this amazing event and all of you tonight. Uhuru! Because there is, in this world, a war of ideas between the side of the oppressor and the side of the oppressed. And tonight, the side of the oppressed won. I want to say all of you. And I want to open it up. We had so many powerful statements and analysis. We had Chairman Omali Shatella. We had all of the great speakers tonight. And we just want to open it up to you to raise anything, to ask a question, make a comment. You have a few minutes. Please feel free.
You can
yes, I think you have
come to the microphone here. So
I was just curious if you have a relationship with the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan. I mean, is that part of your networking? Is that a question that's applicable? I don't even know. So, yeah, the question is there a relationship in your solidarity or your collaboration with the Nation of Islam in this country and Louis Farrakhan, if I'm even saying his name right?
Chairman, did you want to address that at all?
We don't have an organizational relationship with the Nation of Islam. We different kinds of organizations. For one thing, it's a religious organization. It seems to have a completely different mission than what it is that we have. So no, the answer to that question is no. We do have occasion to work with individuals in different cities where we're located. We may have some kind of relationship with a particular mosque, but in general terms of relationship between the party and the Nation of Islam, it does not exist. We were followers of Malcolm X, and as you may know, there was a deep split that occurred in the Nation of Islam. And the revolutionary wing of that was killed. Malcolm X, of course, was that. We feel like he's one of the ideological, we feel like we've inherited much of what Malcolm X represented ideologically. So the Nation of Islam, as it exists today, would not be an organization we would have that kind of relationship with.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, I understand that you have some.
I think we have a.
We have
so people can hear it.
I understand that you have some sort of disability caucus or disability subgroup within your organization. I was wondering how you integrate people with disabilities in the membership. I'm someone with Asperger's syndrome and some chronic illness issues, so I was just curious about how people with disabilities are so brought into the organization.
Well, people, all people that join APSC can become leaders of it. Johan Bedingfield is a member of the National Central Committee of the African People's Solidarity Committee and is a very powerful leader of Uhuru Solidarity Movement as well. And this is a key part of who the Solidarity Movement is. I don't know if Johan, is there anything that you could you address this question? Just go ahead.
How people with disabilities are brought into the organization and how the disability caucus operates.
We have a working group. It's based on the needs reparations, and it doesn't matter if you have a unite with reparations to African people, and to do that in you know, get involved, you know, take ownership in your area of work, and the national outreach corner of USM. So, you know, all of this group is open to anyone. We have another member in St. Louis who has a disability, and still the membership corner for USM. So, yes, this road is open to anyone. It's based on unity with reparations to African people.
Uhuru. I hope you will become a member. Or maybe you did tonight. Yes, thank you, Ephraim.
I think during the hurricane that was very disastrous to the Puerto Rico, the United States imperialist government rejected accepting assistance from the government of Cuba on ideological basis. And the black industries have a potential to grow in the United States. But once you grow, one of the factors for the growth of the black industries is to have foreign relations, foreign trade. You know, because you may produce surplus goods to generate revenue. So, considering that the United States government is totalitarian and like fascistic, how is the USM movement going to handle those legal and tactical problems for the growth of the black start industries?
First of all, I want to say that we've had a deep and profound unity with the struggle of people in Puerto Rico, and that the fundamental contradiction, of course, is however it's characterized, Puerto Rico is a colony of U.S. imperialism. It's been colonized since 1898, and well, by the U.S. since that time. And so I want to say, and then at one juncture, we had a really important relationship with the Puerto Rican Socialist Party. I'm not sure of its status today, whether it's an effective organization, but at one time it was a very important and strong organization. And in terms of how we should be able to engage in, I think you said, economic relationships with, what we are involved in doing is creating relationships within the African world itself. Not with African governments, but with different African organizations and building organizations ourselves throughout the continent of Africa. We create a kind of dual power. For example, we have operated farms in Sierra Leone that's run by the people themselves in Sierra Leone, and of course the government in Sierra Leone is very repressive. And so we do that kind of work. We're busy all the time trying to initiate economic relationships. This is what the Garvey movement was about. You may know that Garvey in 1920 actually built steamship lines for the purpose of being able to trade within Africans being able to trade with each other, and that's a critical thing. That's one of the reasons that this is important again, because we need a movement that cannot be isolated in this country. There cannot be an assumption that the U.S. government can attack these economic institutions or the things that we're doing without having to go up against the solidarity with the North American people as this is occurring. We have tremendous, at one juncture with the Nicaraguan Revolution. I was in Nicaragua shortly after the revolution, when the revolution was fresh and new and what have you. So I think there are going to be different governments that we will be able to establish some kinds of relationships with. It can't now. Most of the world now is under either imminent assault or there's the threat of assault of peoples everywhere, even in places like, for example, Venezuela. Venezuela at one time had opened its door, provided petroleum resources and things like that to different African communities, even in Mississippi, you know, under Chavez. That kind of thing was happening. So we'll have to create and invent our own capacity to do that. Uhuru.
Maybe one more question. We are a bit over.
Good evening. Thanks. Presentation so amazing and really inspired. But it was a term that was used, and I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, and it was black control of the police. Could one of you explain what does that mean?
Black community control of the police.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a reform. It's a reform that struggles with the whole concept of simple-minded Black Lives Matter chants or hands up, don't shoot, or body cameras. It's a reform that moves us toward state power, that we control the organization, police organization in our own community. We establish commissions that's under the leadership, direct leadership of the African community itself, as opposed to it functioning as a part of the colonial state apparatus. It's a reform. It's a kind of demand that's used to mobilize African people in the direction of self-determination and to refuse to accept this colonial state power occupying military force in our community. So we're up against people who, for example, right now in St. Louis, there are almost daily what they call protests that majority of Africans are not participating in at this moment, though the Africans are quite sympathetic. Right now you'll find the protests are like 85% white, following African people who are fighting for certain kinds of reforms, but they're talking about body cameras, right? And they're talking about body cameras, and this is a direct response to a killing that was recorded by a cop. You know, they have the videos of the cop doing it, etc. So we're trying to really press and win this throughout the African community as a legitimate democratic demand, right, for black community control of the police. That the police in our communities, we hire, we fire them, we train them, we set them on their missions, etc., what it is, etc. So it's a reform, but it's not reformism, because we don't see that as the end of the thing. We see that as moving us toward self-determination and winning that in the consciousness of the masses of African people and other people. Because other people should be able to accept the idea that if there are armed people running around the African community with the sanctity that has the authority of the law, then that is only democratic. That force should be controlled by the African community itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're self-policing in a sense.
Yeah, you can call it self-policing. Yes. 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 What's your accent, sister? Trinidad. Oh, Carnival.
Yeah.
Stokely, but not just Stokely, but C.L.R. James. Okay. You know C.L.R. James? Yeah, it was one brilliant man. He said that the future is in the hands of the black working class. Unfortunately, it is not in the heads of the black working class. Yeah. Stokely was from Trinidad.
Uhuru. There's so much to talk about. So I know we have to leave tonight. I'm so elated by the movement that is building here in Boston and what that means, and joining the world in terms of the white community. I know that there is going to be a meeting next week, you said? Could you say again, when is the meeting that people can come out to?
It's our chapter meeting is next Thursday, 7 p.m. at the Boston Public Library Cafe, Newsfeed Cafe.
7 p.m. Okay, 7 p.m. next Wednesday. Thursday. Say it again.
Yeah. Thursday the 26th. Yeah, Thursday, October 26th, 7 p.m. Boston Public Library Newsfeed Cafe. You can
everybody be there.
You can email us and we'll send you the agenda beforehand.
All right. So I want to say Uhuru. I think Hallie has another announcement to make. And unity through reparations. Uhuru.
So just want to let you know, probably the biggest announcement of the evening, our total raise tonight. So our goal was 3,000. We over doubled that. $6,828. Final thing, just want to do a shout out to everyone who helped make this event happen. Casey, Sam, Amanda, Rainer, Bob, David Thomas, David Rold, Patty, Ephraim, Renee, Sakaya, Johan, Nick, Emma, Janet, Jackson, Clyde, Fallon, and the entire National Committee of the Days in Solidarity of African People who've been meeting weekly for like the last 5 months to put this on in this national tour. And they're all over the country, so shout out to them watching the live stream. Thanks for your incredible leadership. Thank you so much for Capella for being here and the African People Socialist Party. And just a shout out that tomorrow, if you have any friends in New York City or Brooklyn, you should invite them to the same event is happening in Brooklyn, New York tomorrow. So tell them to go there. A bunch of us are going to go on a bus tomorrow to be there. And also, we have the newest copy of the Burning Spear newspaper. Please pick up a copy. It's only $1 for the oldest Black Power newspaper, over 47 years in print. Pick one up today. Thank you for coming. Unity through reparations! Unity through reparations!